It was a quiet little village, surrounded by rolling hills, where children's laughter often floated through the air like music carried by the wind. In the heart of this village stood an enormous stone wall that hid something beautiful behind it, a garden so lovely that it could have been plucked straight out of a dream. The garden belonged to a giant. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a heavy brow and a beard the color of iron. The villagers called him the selfish giant, not because he was evil, but because he liked to be left alone. His name was Brontus, though no one dared to call him that. Years ago, before he left for a long journey to visit his friend, an ogre in the northern mountains, the village children had found their way into his garden. They used to play among the grass, run around the trees, and build tiny castles out of flower petals. Their laughter made the birds sing louder, and even the old pear trees seemed to dance with them when the wind blew. But when Brontus returned from the mountains after 7 long years, he was not pleased. It was a crisp spring afternoon when Brontus lumbered down the hill and saw the children laughing in his garden. They were climbing trees, tossing flower petals in the air, and chasing each other with the kind of joy only children know. "What are you doing in my garden?" he thundered, his voice echoing like thunder over the hills. The children froze. A red ball rolled to his boot. One little girl hid behind a tree. Another boy dropped his toy. Without another word, the children scattered, slipping through a hole in the wall like frightened rabbits. Brontus scowled. "My garden is mine. No one shall play here but me." And so, the very next morning, he built an even taller wall around the garden. He hammered sharp iron spikes along the top and hung a sign on the gate. "Trespassers will be punished." He felt satisfied. Finally, there would be peace and quiet. No more shouting, no more laughter, just stillness and the sound of the wind. But the peace he longed for came at a strange cost. Days passed. Then weeks, then months. Spring arrived everywhere, except in the giant's garden. Outside his wall, the fields turned green, and the birds sang sweetly. But inside it was still cold and gray. Frost covered the grass like white lace. The trees stood bare, their branches stiff and lifeless. No flowers bloomed, no birds sang. "Where is spring?" muttered Brontus one morning, wrapping his cloak tightly around him. He looked out from his window and saw only snow and ice. Then something strange happened. As he stepped outside, he heard a whisper, like laughter carried by the wind. But it wasn't laughter. It was the north wind, howling angrily through the empty branches. "We'll stay here," hissed the north wind. "The giant's too selfish for spring." Next came hail, clattering like stones upon the roof. Then snow, blanketing everything in white silence. Even the frost crept out from the shadows, painting the walls with icy fingers. And so, year after year, the garden stayed locked in winter. The children's longing. The children missed the garden terribly. They played in the dusty lanes and on the roadside, but nothing felt the same. "I wish the giant would let us play again," said one little boy, peering through a gap in the wall. "His garden was so beautiful." "Yes," said another. "The trees were taller, and the flowers smelled sweeter there. But no one dared go inside. The iron spikes looked too sharp, and the giant's shadow too large. Still, every now and then, a few brave children would press their faces against the cracks in the wall, peeking through. They could see the white snow and the stiff bare branches inside, and they would sigh. "Poor garden," whispered one girl. It looks lonely. One morning, as the giant lay in bed, he heard something unusual. It wasn't the howl of wind, nor the crack of hail. It was music. He sat up. "A bird in my garden?" He hadn't heard a bird sing there in years. He opened his window. The air was cool but soft. The snow had melted in one corner of the garden, and a patch of green had appeared. There, beneath a small apple tree, stood a group of children. They had somehow found a hole in the wall. The giant's eyes widened. The little ones were climbing the branches and laughing. The apple tree was covered in pink blossoms. Birds fluttered above them, chirping joyfully. The flowers were waking up from their long sleep. But in one corner of the garden, winter still lingered. A tiny boy stood there, too small to climb the tree. He was crying softly, reaching up toward a branch that seemed just out of reach. something stirred in the giant's chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in years, Brontes stepped out without his heavy boots or his stick. He walked slowly toward the garden. But when the children saw him, they screamed and ran again, except for the tiny boy. He was too busy crying to notice the giant's shadow falling over him. Brontes knelt down, his knees pressing into the frosty ground. "Why are you crying, little one?" he asked softly. The boy looked up, his eyes wide and wet. "I can't reach the branch," he said. The giant smiled. A small, awkward smile that felt strange on his face. "Here," he said gently, lifting the boy with both hands. The child's laughter was like the sound of chimes as he climbed onto the branch, and as soon as the boy's laughter filled the air, something miraculous happened. The frost melted. The snow disappeared. Flowers burst open around them, and the birds began to sing louder than ever. The giant stood still, his eyes wide. "It's spring," he whispered. "It's spring!" "In my garden." Then he understood. The reason spring had never come was because he had shut the children out, and with them, joy itself. When the children saw that the giant wasn't angry, they came running back. They surrounded him, tugging at his cloak, laughing. The once terrifying giant sat among them, his laughter booming like thunder, but this time, it was a happy sound. He took down the sign that read, "Trespassers will be punished," and replaced it with another, "Welcome, children." "My garden is yours." He tore down the wall with his own hands. The villagers watched in amazement as bricks fell one by one, revealing the most beautiful sight they had ever seen. A garden full of children and flowers, sunlight spilling over everything like golden honey. From that day on, the children played there every afternoon after school. The giant would sit under a tree, smiling as he watched them. Sometimes he'd join in their games. He built tiny swings for the younger ones and told stories about his travels to the northern mountains. But the little boy he had lifted that day, the one who couldn't reach the branch, had disappeared. No one knew where he went. The passing years' time rolled on. Seasons came and went. The garden grew lovelier every year, and the giant grew older and gentler. His beard turned white as snow, but his heart was warm as spring. Still, he often thought about the little boy. "I'd give anything to see him again," he would say softly. He looked for him among the children every day, but the boy never came. Yet the giant was content, for his garden was full of life again. Birds, blossoms, laughter, and sunlight. The villagers no longer called him selfish. They called him the gentle giant. One winter morning, long after the giant had grown frail and slow, he woke to find the garden in full bloom, though snow still lay on the rooftops beyond the wall. "This is strange," he murmured. "Winter isn't gone yet." He stepped outside and gasped. There, beneath the same tree where he had once helped the little boy, stood the boy himself. He looked exactly the same as before, young, bright-eyed, smiling. But there was something divine about him. Sunlight seemed to shine from his face. The giant hurried over, his heart pounding. "Where have you been, my dear child?" he asked, tears filling his eyes. "I've looked for you every day," the boy smiled. "You let me play in your garden once," he said gently. "Today I've come to take you to mine, the Garden of Paradise." The giant trembled. "Your garden?" "Yes," said the boy. "It's a place where kindness never ends and winter never comes." The giant noticed something then, faint marks on the boy's hands and feet, as though they had been pierced by nails. His heart filled with awe and love. He knelt before the child. "Who are you?" he whispered. The boy smiled, radiant as the morning sun. "You let me play once in your garden," he said. "Now you shall come with me to mine." When the villagers came later that day, they found the giant lying peacefully beneath the tree. His face was calm, his lips curved into a soft smile. Around him, the garden was bursting with color, more beautiful than anyone had ever seen. The children played nearby, not knowing that their dear friend had fallen into an everlasting sleep. But on his face was the light of joy, the joy of someone who had found kindness, and through it, eternity. And from that day on, whenever spring came, the children would say, "This is the giant's season," for every blossom, every bird, Every ray of sunlight in that garden whispered the same simple truth. Kindness makes even the coldest heart bloom again. The same boy who'd fed the stray dog, the same boy who'd melted his heart, the same boy who had unknowingly saved him. He sat down, laughing and crying at once. "Of course," he whispered. "Of course it's him." That weekend, Leo and his mother were in the park when a car pulled up. A man stepped out, mid-30s, clean-shaven, with the same brown hair and warm eyes as Leo. Mr. Harris froze. "Dad," the man whispered. For a moment neither moved. Then Harris dropped his cane and pulled his son into a trembling embrace. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry." "I know," Daniel said softly. "I know." Leo stood beside Patch, eyes wide. "You two, you know each other?" Harris smiled through tears. "More than you can imagine, kid." Daniel knelt and hugged his son. "You found my father before I did," he said. "Guess kindness runs in the family." Leo grinned. "Told you not all people disappoint," Harris laughed, the sound raw and beautiful. "You did, didn't you?" From that day on, the willow bench was never empty. Sometimes the three generations sat together, Harris, Daniel, and Leo, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes Patch dozed at their feet. Sometimes strangers stopped to listen to their laughter, not knowing the story that tied them together. The townsfolk stopped calling him Grumpy George. Now they called him Mr. Harris, the kind old man with the boy and the dog. He never corrected them. Before long, he had a small wooden sign made and nailed it to the bench. "Sit, rest, be kind." When asked why, he said, "Because kindness built this family." Years passed. Leo grew tall, Patch grew gray, and Mr. Harris grew older still. One spring morning, Leo arrived at the park early, carrying a sandwich just like old times. But the bench was empty. On the seat lay a single envelope addressed to him. "Dear Leo, if you're reading this, I'm probably sitting under a different willow tree now. Somewhere quiet, somewhere kind. You once told me I wasn't as grumpy as people said. You were right. You taught me to forgive, to love, and to hope again. Take care of your father. Take care of Patch, and whenever you see someone sitting alone, sit with them. It'll mean more than you think. With all my heart, Walter Harris." Leo sat for a long time, tears falling freely. Then he smiled, a small, sad smile that turned brighter with each passing minute. He placed the letter back on the bench and whispered, "I will," Patch barked softly. As if agreeing years later, the willow tree still stood. Tall and golden, the bench grew older too. Its paint fading, but its message clear. Sit, rest, be kind. Children played nearby. Dogs chased sticks, and a young man, Leo, now grown, sat with his own little daughter beside him. She pointed at the sign. "What does it mean, Daddy?" he smiled. "It means kindness never dies, sweetheart. It just passes on," she thought for a moment. "Like stories?" "Exactly," he said, wrapping an arm around her. "Like stories." They sat in silence, the wind rustling through the willow leaves, whispering the same old truth, that even the smallest act of kindness can grow into something eternal.